Hey, it's Jordan with Laundromat Resource, and I want to tell you the 3 most common reasons laundromats fail. Yes, they do fail, not often, but they do fail, and here's why. The number 1 reason that laundromats fail is poor management practices. Now, there's a baseline that every laundromat owner should adhere to. Sadly, many laundromat owners don't, and that's where the birth of what we call zombie mats comes in. So what's the baseline? The baseline is you need to keep your laundromat clean, which should be a no-brainer. You're going there to clean your clothes, so you should be able to keep it clean, safe, and keep your machines operational. So that's the baseline of laundromat ownership, the basics, what you should be doing and keeping it up consistently. Clean, safe, and all the machines operational as quickly as possible when they break down. Okay, now that we've established a baseline of laundromat management, let's talk about what we need to do beyond that to have a properly running laundromat. Well, one of the big things that a lot of laundromat owners don't do and haven't done for a long time is reinvesting in their business. Now, that might mean something big like replacing old washers and dryers. That also could mean something smaller like painting on a regular basis, having a regular schedule of painting the walls inside, outside, whatever, updating signage, redoing the flooring. It can be a whole lot of things, big and small, but reinvesting in the business, number 1, keeps things looking and feeling and running well, but also number 2, it communicates to your customers that you care about their business and about their community and about their experience in your laundromat. So you need to reinvest in your business. One other quick tip in managing your laundromat well is to communicate well. And that's both communicating your expectations with your employees and being very clear about what you want them to do and also holding them to those expectations, but also in communicating with your customers, both what you're doing with your business and the plans that you have for it, but also on the receiving end of the communication, listening to your customers and their feedback and taking that into consideration when you're making decisions about how you want to run your laundromat business. Okay, with a little bit of time and attention, we can avoid the number 1 reason laundromats fail, poor management, by running our laundromats well, by maintaining that baseline of clean, safe, and operational, and by reinvesting in our business. So let's talk about the second reason that laundromats fail, and it has to do with agreeing to and signing a bad lease. So let me give you some tips on what to be looking for in a lease to determine whether it's a good lease or a bad lease. Tip number 1 is what I call the 25% rule. And what this means is you want to look at the amount of rent paid, the total amount of rent paid, as a percentage of the gross income of the laundromat. And the 25% rule says that we're shooting for the rent amount to be about 25% of the gross income. Now, the higher above that 25% rule, the less valuable the laundromat is. So that 25% rule is not a hard and fast rule, but it gives you a ballpark of what to be shooting for. And obviously, less than 25% of the gross income is even better. Tip number 2 is what I call the 10-year rule. And the 10-year rule says this: a lease for a laundromat needs to be long-term, and it's because you can't really move a laundromat. So if your lease expires and your landlord doesn't renew it or doubles or triples your rent, you're in a bad spot. So you need a long-term lease. And the 10-year rule says in almost every situation, it doesn't make sense to sign a lease that's less than 10 years long. But I will say that for most of my consulting clients, even 10 years makes me feel pretty uncomfortable, and I'm looking really for more like 15 to 20 years on that lease. But at a bare minimum, 10 years is what we're looking for, and longer than that is better. What that could look like, just to give you an example, is have a lease that's 10 years long, but then there's 2 5-year options to renew the lease at predefined terms for you as the buyer. So at the end of that 10 years, you have the option to renew it for another 5 years, and at the end of that 5 years, you have the option again to renew it for another 5 years. And the third tip is one other thing that you got to look out for is the fine print gotchas that can be buried in a lease. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky. This is your first time buying a laundromat and reading through a retail lease, especially one for a laundromat specifically. It's really easy to miss some of these gotchas. And real quick story, I had a consulting client. We were looking through the lease and this laundromat looked really good. It looked like like a really good deal, but we found one little clause. It was one sentence and it turned out to be a deal breaker that the lawyer that they had read through the lease missed and that the buyer missed the first time they read through it. And here was what it said. It basically said if the retail center that this laundromat was in got a new anchor tenant for their main building, the landlord has the right to give all the tenants 90-day notice to vacate the property, basically. So that meant at any point in time, this laundromat was 90 days away from being out of business. And that turned out to be a deal breaker. And my buyer actually ended up walking away from that deal. So there can be little gotchas like that that are really easy to look over and they can be very easy to miss. So here's what I suggest. I suggest that you have 3 people read your lease when you're getting ready to sign, because remember, this is a long-term thing. This is like a marriage that you're entering here. And a lot of times these leases are going to have a personal guarantee, especially lately. So here's what I recommend when you're getting ready to sign a long-term lease for your laundromat. Is have 3 people read it. Number 1, you need to read the lease. I know it's long and I know it's boring and I know there's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo that you may or may not understand, but you need to read what you're getting yourself into and try to understand it as best as possible. Okay. Number 2 person is you need to have a lawyer read over your lease. There can be legal gotchas in there and liabilities that you may miss on your own that a lawyer will be looking for. And you definitely want to have that protection behind you by having a lawyer look over that. Number 3 is you need to have somebody who has experience in the laundromat industry who can look for not the legal gotchas that the lawyer can be looking for, but the laundromat specific gotchas, like the example I just gave, where a lawyer may not know the nuances of what it means to own a laundromat. So have somebody who understands the laundromat business read over that lease for you. And that can be another owner, that can be a broker, that can be a consultant, but have somebody who understands a business looking over this lease with you who can look for those laundromat specific gotchas. Now, if you need somebody to read over a lease, feel free to book a call with one of the consultants at laundromatresource.com/coaching who can read over your lease with you and for you and look out for those laundromat specific gotchas and help you figure out a plan on how to negotiate with the landlord to make sure that you are covered and are not entering into a bad lease. There'll be a link up here or up here, and down in the description if you want to go check out that service. Okay, the number 3 reason that most laundromats fail is undercapitalization. They don't have enough money when they buy the laundromat. Now, I'm going to tell you something that might seem a little counterintuitive at first, but hopefully I can walk you through and it'll make sense at the end. Here it is. Are you ready for it? The cheaper the laundromat, the riskier it usually is. Now, why would that be? Because if you're buying a more expensive laundromat, obviously it's going to require more money up front. However, what I have found I've consulted with 1,000 people, I think probably literally 1,000 people, and I've looked at thousands of deals. And here's what I find is that generally speaking, the more expensive the laundromat, the safer that investment is, because those laundromats that cost more money usually have a higher cash flow and there's higher margin for error in there and higher margin for any variance in income and expenses that happen. If you buy a cheap laundromat, say under $150,000 or so, those laundromats generally are either not making very much money or they're not making any money at all or even losing money. And so when you buy those laundromats, you need to buy them knowing that you're going to have to invest in that business, either money or time and effort. And a lot of times all 3, time, money, and effort into those laundromats in order to make them profitable. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy those laundromats, but you need to know that there's extra risk involved in buying a laundromat under about $150,000. Here's one other thing that I've never heard anybody else say, but the riskiest laundromats that you can get are those quote unquote free laundromats. Now, if you're not familiar with free laundromats, check out the video here, and a link down below, and you go watch the video I have about free laundromats. And that 3rd laundromat that I talk about in that video is the quote unquote free laundromat here. That is the riskiest laundromat that you can buy. And the reason for that is, and here's the basic concept behind it, is a laundromat that's either been shut down or a laundromat that is just being run extremely poorly and is not making money and is just really run down. And you go and basically sign a lease with the landlord and take over that laundromat. Now, obviously, if a laundromat is shut down or if it's being run super poorly, it's already a failed laundromat or a failing laundromat. And so it's much more risky to get into that business and try try to revive it than it is to buy one that's existing, that's already cash flowing and ready to go for you, already putting money in your pocket from day one. Okay, so the question then becomes, well, how much money do I need to have in order to not fall prey to being undercapitalized when you buy a laundromat? Great question, glad you asked. Generally speaking, you want to follow what I call the 3-month rule. And that basically just says have 3 months worth of expenses in reserves just in case you need it when you're getting started with your laundromat. That will help you mitigate all the risks that could be present of things going wrong or business dropping or whatever could happen. That will make sure that you can continue on and make sure that business is making money for the long term. All right, so the 3 reasons laundromats fail: poor management, a bad lease, and undercapitalization. We want to avoid all 3 of those. Okay, those are the 3 ways laundromats fail, but we want to make sure you buy correctly the first time, every time, because once you buy correctly, the sky's the limit for you. If you want to scale that business, you can. If you want to buy back more of your time, you can. The sky is the limit when you buy right the first time. And if you want to make sure you buy right the first time and that you're on the cutting edge of operations, you might want to consider joining the Laundromat Resource Pro community. I just want to highlight a couple of the perks. There's a whole lot more than this, but a couple of the perks of joining the community. Number 1, we do a live call every single week. And on those live calls, we do live Q&As. We do deal analysis calls where we go through actual deals that pro members are looking at, and we do it together to analyze these deals. We have panel discussions and a whole lot more on these live calls every single week. The pro community also gets access to sophisticated tools like our laundromat analysis calculator that will calculate a value based on information that you gather from the seller or from yourself during due diligence. And it will calculate a value so that you can have an accurate value for your laundromat the first time when you're ready to purchase it. And one of the things I'm most excited about with the pro community is our mastermind groups. And that is where we pair laundromat owners and prospective laundromat owners into groups of 3 to 5 or 6 who meet on a regular basis to share each other's goals, to keep each other accountable, to talk about what's working with their laundromats and what's not working, and to problem solve together. The mastermind groups, I'm just super duper excited about it. And I want to invite you to come and join the Laundromat Resource Pro community. Come be a part of a mastermind group, other people thinking just like you who are on the same path as you towards financial freedom through laundromat ownership. So check out the link above or down below, or just go to laundromatresource.com/pro and join the pro community and achieve that financial freedom through laundromat ownership. The pro community, the whole point of it is to help 5,000 people achieve financial freedom through laundromat ownership. I hope you're one of them, and we'll see you over there on the community.